This is Jay Martin.
Welcome to the Jay Martin Show, where we dissect the greatest minds in geopolitics and finance. And I'm joined today once again by Shawn Khunkhun. Shawn, it's great to see you again.
Good to see you, Jay. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. So we're going to talk about a few things today. Dolly Varden, your company, just put out some very material news, and I want to talk about that, why it's significant, and what this means for shareholders of your company. Before we jump into that news, you've been on the road a ton since the last time I saw you. Your team has as well, I think, like all over Europe and the Middle East, I believe, talking to investors. And so what's the temperature check right now, Shawn? You've been on the road a lot, checking in with institutional money, private investors, talking precious metals. What's the sentiment like that you're running into?
Great question. And I think it really changes and varies region to region. Speaking about the Middle East, I think there's definitely more appetite for energy, uranium, copper, and big projects. And so just depending on, obviously Europe has a tradition, if you're in Switzerland or in Germany, for gold and understanding the principles of sound money and real money and strong Austrian economic principles. So just depending on where you're going, the appetite changes. I had the treat of spending an hour and a half with Eric Sprott yesterday. And that was a really, anytime I get to listen to Eric or talk to him, he's somebody who, really, if you go back 25 years, he was one of the first investors on the scene for gold. And he was really the poster guy for the gold industry. And when institutional money came into the space, he was the rock star that they all wanted to see and hear from, because he was there calling it early. He saw that trend. Eric had done really well, shorting other sectors. And I think ultimately gold and all the principles and everything we celebrate about gold is the ultimate bear's call on other factors in the world. I think those principles are so true over the next 2 years. All this uncertainty, whether it's currency wars, trade wars, real wars, we're seeing all that stuff increase. And, sitting down with the godfather of precious metals and really hearing from him, somebody who's got, you talk about skin in the game, he's in, right? And what I walked away from that meeting, my takeaway was Eric is rare because he can stomach the volatility and has the patience to stay the trade. And it's what's made him the self-made billionaire, and he's done it in precious metals. And, if you look at the last year, you go and you really analyze 2024. The reality is there's a lot of noise and there's not a lot of fundamental investors. Last year was a sensational year. You look at some of the big companies, like I'm here in Toronto and I'm going to attend the Mining Hall of Fame dinner where I'm going to talk about two inductees, Sean Boyd and Frank Giustra, that are being honored tonight. And Sean Boyd's company, Agnico Eagle, if you look at where it's trading today, it's trading at a 52-week high. And that's a great example of how the industry is working. The gold price had a sensational year last year. And, it's interesting to me that people are down when the reality is we're talking about an industry that is making more money than it ever has. And, companies are lean, mean, have less debt than they did at other times. And I think the sector is actually incredible. I spent a lot of time this morning talking to a dear friend who is down in Puerto Rico, who, really studies and has a company that focuses on analyzing, people's interest in different sectors.
Okay.
And through his data, what I realized, and it surprised me, was October was a phenomenal month. That, we've been in this increase in activity, particularly in silver and gold. Institutional investors, high net worth retail investors, they are reading and consuming more articles and more reports in this sector than they have in a long time. And it's been a rise. And if you take a step back and you look at my company, Dolly Varden, we started last year around 60 cents a share. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And in that October move, we were up to $1.50 a share. And that correlates well with all that interest. And so what makes this sector so challenging is also what makes it so great, in that if you can stomach the volatility, if you can stomach the fact that Dolly's down 40% from its highs, but appreciate that it's still up 50% from its lows, right? If you can stomach that, you can make a lot of money. And if you can't, you can lose a fortune. And it's having that right type of makeup, and few have it. And it's why I think 95% of speculators lose.
Right.
But those that win like Eric Sprott.
That's so interesting. The October sentiment indicators that your friend in Puerto Rico is looking at. And I was racking my brain. I was like, what was occurring, in the fall of 2024 that would have inspired that attention, right, to come to the industry in that way? And I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that. And then also just, your comment on Agnico, 52-week highs, right? And Dolly had a great year. You're right, though. It's often that I speak with investors in this sector today, and they're like, what's with the decoupling of the gold price of the equities prices, or the gold or the precious metals prices of the equity prices? I step back from that, and it's like, well, I don't know how to time a market, but I know that every single investment trend works the same way. There's always one pillar idea or concept that runs, and investors pile into it and bid the price up. And then they start looking for the what's next opportunities. And that's not a mining thing or a precious metals thing. That's an investor behavior thing. I mean, like Bitcoin's maybe the most polarizing example of that. The pillar idea runs, and all the little maybe next opportunities run after it, right? It's the same in the recent AI trend. It's the same in the plant-based meat trend. Like 2 years ago, Beyond Meat went public, and suddenly plant-based meat's its own asset class. And so, and every mining cycle has been exactly that way every single time. Now, I can't time it. I'd love to be able to, but I can't. But, gold is hitting all-time highs. We're seeing the bigger companies catch the attention, and eventually, like always happens with every investment trend, investors look for the what's next opportunities, and they start going down the food chain. When you hear about that October sentiment, like, did you have any extrapolations off of that, Shawn, or what do you think?
Well, look, to answer your question, the first question, anyways, it was price. That simple.
Okay.
I think investors were just, they were interested because they saw the silver price had gone from 25 to 35. And so they were consuming that. That's my take on it, right?
Yeah.
I think so many times you get the price move, and then people ask why and look for the narrative, right?
Yeah.
And I think the reality is the fundamentals that drove the price. We've talked about a lot every time I'm on. The increased demand, the lack of supply, those fundamentals are in place that created that price spike, which then brought in the interest. I go, the more time I spend in this industry, and the more time I study the greats who have done really well, I try to break it down to its simplest form. And what I've come up with is a couple of things, and these are not my ideas. These are just, I'm regurgitating. I'm not reinventing the wheel here, but I think this could maybe help. And the first one is, the winning is done in the buying. And I just think there's two ways to make money in our business. discovery, right? And so project specific with discovery, and that can lead to a lot of value creation, right? And the other way to make money in our business is by getting the commodity right in terms of the timing. And so those are the two things that are driving our sector. And if you can have both working at once, it's like lightning in a bottle. And what excites me about my company is we have seen the silver price double since we got going a few years ago. And we have seen our project triple in size. And so we got a rising price and you got a growing project. And we got a lot of other little nuances that are super important, like treasury and the technical group that's out there unlocking the asset. But again, I think it doesn't have to be complicated, but you have to be patient, right? And you can't put a calendar on the when. You just have to you have to trust in a team and sit tight and be right. And we're in a bull market and nobody knows it, and that excites me. And the most seasoned investors are frustrated, which is fantastic. And I think that in a bull market, if you're not happy, go hide out in Agnico, right? And if you want to take on some risk, buy Dolly Varden.
There it is. All right. Well, let's talk about Dolly Varden. So I suspect you met with Eric Sprott yesterday. He's one of your shareholders to talk about your drill results, or I imagine that was one of the things you guys discussed, because this week you guys put out the latest drilling results for Dolly Varden, specifically the Wolfe vein, part of the Kitsault Valley project. And there's some real highlights here, Shawn. One being a 120 meter step out hole that showed was it 26 meters of 379 grams per ton on average. And just a refresher, the step out drilling, that's when we step out from the ore body to see how far it can go, right? Compared to infill drilling when we go into the ore body to learn more about it. So walk me through the highlights though, Shawn, what you released this week, and then I'm going to pull on some threads.
Yeah, it's we put out a lot of information this week, and what is as important as the news release that the company put out a few days ago, there was an editorial that came out today that really explains, for any investor, even somebody that's been around the industry for 21 years like myself, or somebody like Eric Sprott, who's an accountant, understanding the geology, getting into these really complicated, technically, deep news releases doesn't help you or me. It's really important for us to understand, okay, well, what's the goal here? What's the vision? What's the plan? And the simplest way for me to explain it is, look, it's really expensive to buy silver if you don't have it. And, for companies to go out, we just saw, speaking of Agnico Eagle, they just bought O3 in the gold space, and they paid a 67% premium for that asset. Well, I don't want to pay a 67% premium for anything. I want to cost effectively go out and find this stuff. And so we got a project that used to produce. And so we're stepping out away from the old mine, and we're trying to see if there's more silver around an old mine, because I was told when I started in the industry, that's the best place to look for it. So what the press release said, we put a lot of energy, effort, and money into the 2024 drill program. We drilled 32,000 meters. The goal of the drill program was to find more silver around those past producing mines, to join deposits, to try to find new veins. And also, while we're doing all that, de-risking the ounces that we do have by doing the infill drilling to get the confidence so that as we move towards economic studies and an eventual mine plan, we have the confidence that the silver is in the ground, and it's not only is it high grade, not only is it thick and wide and going to surface, but we think it could be pretty low cost to produce because we think it could be bulk mineable.
So run me through those grades that you've discovered with this recent program, Shawn.
Yeah, listen, the headline number there, 379 grams per ton. And again, that would mean nothing to a layman investor who is just looking at this going, well, what does that mean, right?
Yeah.
And what that means is we're finding silver in the top 90 percentile in terms of global grades. And what makes Dolly so unique is not only do we find high grade silver, we're finding it in a safe jurisdiction, and we're finding it over thickness.
Mm-hmm.
Jay, I've studied silver deposits all over the world. And what ends up happening is we're at a time in the world, 5,000 years after starting to use this stuff as money, the low-hanging fruit has been picked away. Miners are having to go deeper and deeper and deeper. And if you're focused on primary high-grade silver mines, they're these narrow veins. And when you pick away all those narrow veins at surface, you're having to travel down hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of meters. And you know what, Jay? That's expensive to develop. And why I celebrate Dolly Varden is we're in some rocks that host some of the biggest deposits in the world, like SK Creek and Brucejack and Premier. And so we're not having to go deep. And these aren't skinny high-grade veins. These are, really wide high-grade veins. So that's what makes this project unique. It's what makes it special, and it's what makes it real. And it's going to make it a lot less to develop than some of our peers. And, unfortunately, silver's only found in so many places, right? Bolivia, Argentina, Peru, Mexico. So as you start going through the list and you say, well, do I want to be in Bolivia? Do I want to be in Mexico? Do I want to be in Peru? You start ranking these jurisdictions, particularly after the political announcement on Monday. I really want to be in Canada. Mm-hmm. And so I'm very happy, and I celebrate the fact that we're finding it up in the Great White North.
I love that. Now, I'm really happy that you kept on mentioning the thickness as well. This has actually come up a lot recently in our commodity university. So shout out to all you guys. You are the next generation of killer investors in this sector, but a lot of questions about why width matters and why thickness matters, because most people tend to focus on grade and size are really, really important. But just for the most simplest analogy that we've been using is, here's why width matters, thickness matters. We're scooping a material, in this case, silver, out of the ground, right? And if we were to pull this over to just simply scooping water out of a river, and we had a bucket, we go to a very wide river, we can dip that bucket in, it comes out full of high grade water. If we go to a skinny river where the water is kind of weaving its way through gravel and sand and debris, we can dip that bucket in. We're going to get the same high grade water, but we're also going to get a bunch of other stuff, right? All the debris. So we just have to scoop many more times to get the same amount of water. Minerals work just the same. And so when we're looking at these veins, that's why width matters. It makes it much more cost efficient to pull the material out of the ground, because you have to remove less stuff to get to that high grade. And that's what Shawn's talking about when he says thickness. Like we talked about the Fresnillo mine in the university a lot. This is the world's largest primary silver producer, and it's high grade. High grade usually starts around 200 grams per ton, and Fresnillo is like 200 to 600 grams per ton. But the width is like 1 to 10 meters, right? And these results that Dolly just put out, I think were 21.6 meters. That 379 grams per ton, that was at 21.6 meters in width. And so just a bit of context there. And how did I do, Shawn? Does that make sense to you and how you interpret this?
Can I use that analogy? I like that water analogy, because it paints a picture, and it's a way to explain dilution elegantly to those who are starting to come to the space. And Jay, I really think you've done a phenomenal job, and I can't wait for your conference, which we'll be attending. And this is and that's just one of the things that I got coming from Eric Sprott is we need more industry advocates and educators out there, because ultimately I think we've done a poor job as an industry, explaining what it is we do, explaining what gold and silver are. And, I think there's an education that needs to be done. And, people like yourself are doing a great job, and your conference is a great forum I think Frank's given a couple of panel talks there, Frank Justra. And there's going to be, I don't know how, probably another 100, legends that are showing up from all over the world. But I'm looking forward to attending that and, just applaud the work you're doing.
Hey, man, I really appreciate that. Yeah, it's going to be awesome. It's in 8 days. Yes, Frank Juster is joining us twice on stage, once on the gold forecast panel, and then again to talk about CBDCs and the US dollar and the future of currencies. So reflecting on Monday's news, you can go to goodbyejustin.com for tickets. We bought that URL just to have fun, or vricmedia.com. But congrats on these results, Shawn. So I want to get back to this because, as mentioned, high grade typically starts around 200 grams per ton. The hole we've been talking about thus far is 379 grams per ton, but there was about 4 holes that were worth having a look at, all sort of in that ballpark. We can go there more if you'd like to, but what I'd like to ask you is what's next for you, right? You've learned a lot more about the deposit. It's bigger than you thought it was. You proved that through the 120 meters step out. How far does this thing go? We went out 120 meters and found more of it. So now you go back to your 2025 drill program with a bit more insight into what's down there. I imagine that provides data for a much more targeted drilling campaign. But what's next for you guys? What's next on the agenda?
So we have more results from the 2024 drill program to still get out. So
yeah, you do. Yeah.
Within the coming weeks, we've the last news release we had prior to this one was around the Homestake silver deposit. We tagged a gold zone, and that gold zone delivered almost 9 grams of gold over almost 50 meters. And 100 meters of over 4.5 grams of gold. So we've got this sensational gold zone that we've drilled another 24 holes around, and we've got those holes to report. The company's got about $34 million in the bank. So
your 2025 program's funded, yeah? I'd imagine
we're funded, and apart from just really putting our heads and focus into continuing to build on Wolfe and continuing to drill out at Homestake, where we're moving towards is we're moving towards a new resource estimate. We're moving towards putting some economics around the project. We're moving, towards thinking about things like permitting and advancing the project. But the reality is, we've been very lucky that we've got all these great shareholders, people like Hecla, America's largest silver miner and Canada's second largest silver miner. So we've got all these great shareholders like Eric Sprott, and we've got a little bit of money for an exploration company, $30 million in the bank. If our shares take a big run on the back of results, on the back of the price of silver moving from 28 through 30 and higher, we may challenge ourselves once again to look at growing through adding some other assets to the portfolio. And it's something that we've done before. You and I got to know each other after after the Homestake acquisition. Yeah. And that was a real sea change moment for the company, where we went from being a $50 million company to almost a $500 million company there in October. And, we're monitoring some other great opportunities. And one of those opportunities, actually, we've already transacted on, which was Big Bulk, which was a copper gold porphyry we brought into the company. And look, we're getting the permits in hand for that. This could be the feeder of all the silver and gold mineralization. So we're looking to, in 2025, allocate 5% of our budget to see if we can tag something really big on this copper gold porphyry. And so that's exciting. That's a new kind of component to the company that makes us more dynamic. And it's not just giving us silver exposure, but it's giving us the potential for more gold and copper exposure. And apart from that, just, look, we're on sale right now. You may not heard a lot from me when the stock was $1.45, but you're going to hear a lot from me now that it's under $1. It's 97 cents. It's bounced off a low of 89. It's heading higher, like the price of silver. There's such correlation with the price of silver. And so I'm going to get out and, introduce the name to any investor who hasn't already heard it, because I think there's a lot of value here. And I just want to leave you with one other thought, which is last year the silver price was up 20%. The SILJ, which Dolly Varden is a part of that index, was only up 6%. Okay. Now I think at the end of the day, in a normal environment where you've got the metal moving up, SILJ should be up 60%. Usually you're getting like 3x performance from these types of vehicles. And so I find it, you made a point earlier about the lack of performance or the disparity between the equities and the price of the metal. And I think that is the opportunity for the investor. Like, you've got this opportunity where you got record high gold prices. Silver is looking like it's poised to make a big move. And even some of the big bears that have been very negative in the space are starting to get very bullish. And so, we had a 50 million share short position on the SILJ going into year end. And, look, I think we're starting to see that break, and we're starting to see the cover, and we're starting to see the price move in the right direction here.
Okay. Look, Shawn, I appreciate your time, man. So 2025, we have more drill results coming out, a new drill program. You guys are cashed up, might be looking at asset acquisition, moving towards a new resource estimate and maybe some development conversations, but time will tell. Appreciate your time today. It's always great catching up with you and getting your perspective on the silver market, man. I love it. My audience always loves hearing from you. So thanks again for making the time today.
Thanks for having me, and we'll see you in a week.